The topic for tonight named this discussion, "The Moral of the Story is," just kind of an open-ended statement there, talking to others about Jesus. And we've touched on this in our high school class before. Haven't gone into it a lot, but we always look for opportunities to talk to people about the Bible, to discuss the Word. It doesn't always happen, instantaneously or naturally. Chris has made the comment before, approaching somebody at a gas station. I wait in that line at Costco, and then when I get in line, if I stop to talk to somebody about the Bible, I'm going to get shot by the person waiting behind me. So not the best place for me, at least. But we have conversations all the time with family, with friends. It doesn't have to be with a stranger. In fact, it's rarely with a stranger, but we have conversations constantly, or at least we should seek out conversations constantly with friends and family, workmates, whoever it may be, to have the chance to discuss Jesus, to have this chance to discuss the Word. So tonight I just wanted to kind of get into the best way to effectively communicate when we're doing that. And as I titled this, "The Moral of the Story is," I got to thinking that's how when we received bedtime stories from our parents, those bedtime stories often ended. We may have even ended our bedtime stories that we gave to our children in that same way. We used to be able to watch, now I'm dating myself, but we used to be able to watch TV, network TV at night, and almost every show would basically end in that way. Maybe it didn't say the moral of the story is, but there was always a morally sound conclusion, whether it was choosing family or love or commitment or whatever the case may be. There was always a good moral resolution or choice for somebody to make or learn from. It is hard to find that now, very hard to find that, whether it's on TV or in the media or anywhere else. So it kind of falls on us. It falls on the church to go out there and share that message of what the moral good is and what the moral of the story is, why we're here. So as we try to connect with people we know, people we don't know, to discuss God, to discuss the Word, Christianity, Christian traits, naturally we want to look to Jesus. WWJD, what would Jesus do? And fortunately, it's laid out in the Gospels exactly what he did do and exactly how he did speak to people. And Jesus was certainly an effective communicator, on top of having the most important message that's ever been delivered. But the way in which he spoke to the masses. And we're going to get into tonight some of his parables. To be an effective communicator, what would you say that you need? What are some of the things that you need to really make a connection with somebody when you're a communicator? Any thoughts? Know your subject. Gotta listen. Whatever you approach your subject with, and your subject being the person that you're conversing with, you have to deliver the message in a way that it resonates with them. You have to speak on their wavelength when you're conversing to create that connection. And as I wrote down that, it made me think of a TV show that I often watched in the 80s for a good laugh. Cheers. If any of you watched Cheers back in the 80s and early 90s, there was one individual in that show named Fraser Crane, psychologist, and he was basically the only educated individual at this establishment. And he tried to raise the level of intellect in the Cheers establishment a number of times. One of the times he brought in a Charles Dickens novel, and he tried to read the rest of the barflies, A Tale of Two Cities. So they turn their stools around, and they listen to him for a moment. He starts off, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times." And immediately Norm holds up his hand and says, "Whoa, whoa, whoa. Which was it? At that point, he had already lost them. He was not going to make that connection with them. They were far gone. So he ends up, needless to say, incorporating some fictional elements into that story to get them back. As we look at the way that Jesus approached conversing with others, getting across, conveying a message, and making that connection, one of the most important ways that he established that moral of the story was through parables. And what is a parable? If we were to define parable, what is a parable? Story with a moral lesson, absolutely. There's a graph here that I found online that I liked the explanation. The parables of Jesus make up a crucial part of the Bible. Jesus had the wisdom to simplify the profound spiritual truths he needed to share with humanity in the form of relatable stories that are easy to understand. A parable is a tale about a common subject to illustrate a more profound, valuable moral lesson. The source definition of the word means a placement side by side for the purpose of comparison. We compare things every day. We compare things in almost every conversation that we have, whether we're realizing we're doing it or not. Other than maybe presenting the facts in a statement to somebody, I would say that somehow drawing a comparison is probably the next most common form of conversation that we have. I immediately go back to my 17 years as a sports writer. Everything was about comparisons. When you are doing a rankings, a top 25 rankings, what are you doing? You're comparing those teams against one another. When we watch TV and they're selecting the 72 teams for the NCAA basketball tournament, they're comparing resumes of all those teams. It's constant comparisons, but it's not only in sports. If we go to a restaurant that somebody else hasn't been to and we're explaining what that restaurant was like, we're most commonly going to bring up another restaurant that it's better than, maybe not as good as, similar to. We do that in every aspect of life. We're always comparing. But why are we doing that? To reach the person we're conversing with on their wavelength, to make sure that they have an understanding, a certain amount of knowledge. If we're comparing something that somebody knows nothing about to something else that somebody knows nothing about, that connection's never going to happen. When Jesus spoke in parables, what did he speak about? What were his parables about? I'll read off a few things, a few elements here. Subject matters, I should say, that he included as the primary element in his parables. Light, the parable of the lamp, the parable of the 10 virgins. Seeds, parable of the sower, parable of the mustard seed. A fishing net, a man's heart. Hidden treasure, sheep, an unforgiving person. Workers, laborers in the vineyard. Sons and their fathers. Farmers, weddings, fig trees multiple times. The Good Samaritan, the lost coin. These are all things that are very simple, common subjects. Do you think Jesus knew that 2,000 years after his life, these subjects would all be still known by mankind today? I think he did. I think he knew very well when he delivered these stories, that these moral stories, that this was a story given not just to the mass right there that he was speaking to, not just to that audience, but for everyone else who was going to hear it hundreds and thousands of years later on. And that allows for an evergreen topic. It continues to be relevant. It continues to be easily understood by us today the same way it was thousands of years ago. Let's, now that we've kind of ventured into the parables and the way that Jesus delivered his message, Let's go through a couple of the parables. If you turn to the book of Matthew, and we'll be in Matthew most of the time here. And let's start with the one he starts with, and the sower in Matthew 13. That same day Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake. Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it, while all the people stood on the shore. Then he told many things in parables, saying, a farmer went out to sow his seed. As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path. The birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil. It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow. But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched, and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among the thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil, where it produced a crop, 160 or 30 times what was sown. He who has ears, let him hear. The disciples came to him and asked, why do you speak to the people in parables? He replied, the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has been given more, and he will have an abundance. Whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken from him. This is why I speak to them in parables. I'm going a little further down in the chapter, still on the parable of the sower. Listen then to what the parable of the sower means. When anyone hears the message about the kingdom and does not understand it, the evil one comes and snatches away what was sown in his heart. This is the seed sown along the path. The one who received the seed that fell on the rocky places is the man who hears the word and at once receives it with joy. But since he has no root, he lasts only a short time. When trouble or persecution comes because of the word, he quickly falls away. The one who received the seed that fell among the thorns is the man who hears the word, but the worries of this life and the deceitfulness of wealth choke it, making it unfruitful. But the one who received the seed that fell on good soil is the man who hears the word and understands it. He produces a crop yielding 160 or 30 times what was sown. So this is one of the rare instances where Jesus not only offers the parable, but offers the explanation to the parable as well. Most of the parables answer the question for you. As we read through them, we can fill in that blank. As we were just saying, the moral of the story is, we read that parable and we know what that is, because he speaks in such easy to understand terms and comparisons. Let's look at a couple of other shorter ones. And I bring your attention to these just because, we know these and we know many of them by heart, but it's good to be reminded of them. It's good to think about what the moral is and see if we can apply that. Parable of the hidden treasure, Matthew 13:44. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. When a man found it, he hid it again, and then in his joy went and sold all that he had and bought that field. So very quick parable there. The moral of the story is, what would you say the moral of the story is for the hidden treasure? There's nothing in this world that's going to be more important than the treasure that we lay up for ourselves in heaven, that God's laid up for us in heaven. He sold all that he had. There's nothing on this earth that was more valuable than that hidden treasure that will be eternal life. so many of the parables start off just like that. The kingdom of heaven is like. Oh, that's God, Jesus often spoke in simile and metaphor, right? We speak in simile and metaphor every day. Comparison using like or as is simile, metaphor without the use of like or as, but we're constantly drawing easy to understand comparisons. Parable of the net, Matthew 13:47 and 50 through 50. Once again, the kingdom of heaven is like a net that was let down into the lake and caught all kinds of fish. When it was full, the fishermen pulled it up on the shore. Then they sat down and collected the good fish in the baskets, but threw the bad away. This is how it will be at the end of the age. The angels will come down and separate the wicked from the righteous and throw them into a fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Once again here, the moral of the story is that we're not we're not going to get away from sin or sinners while we're here on earth. That sin will continue to exist, but at the end of this short time that we have on earth, that's when the separation is going to take place. We won't always be around sin. We won't always be around the people who decided not to put God first, did not put their hidden treasure above all else. Let's hit one or two more. Another short one, Parable of the Lost Sheep, Matthew 18. Verses 10 through 14. See that you do not look down on one of these little ones, for I tell you that their angels in heaven always see the face of my Father in heaven. What do you think? If a man owns 100 sheep and one of them wanders away, will he not leave the 99 on the hills and go to look for the one that wandered off? And if he finds it, I tell you the truth, he is happier about the one sheep than about the 99 that did not wander off. In the same way, your Father in heaven is not willing that any of these little ones should be lost. I love that one. It's the same as the lost coin. When we look up at the sky at night and see all the stars and realize just how small a speck we are in this universe, we can still turn to these verses. We can turn to this parable from Jesus and know that we are still important to God. That our soul, no matter how small or insignificant we may seem at times, we are that important to God. Every single soul is. And every single soul that's brought to God, all the more reason to engage with as many people as we can in speaking about the Scriptures. The more people that we can bring to God and grow the church, the happier the Lord's going to be. Let's see if we can fit one more in here. Let's go to Matthew 21 and the parable of the two sons. Matthew 21 and 28. What do you think? There was a man who had two sons. He went to the first and said, Son, go and work today in the vineyard. I will not, he answered. But later he changed his mind and went. Then the father went to the other son and said the same thing. He answered, I will, sir. But he did not go. Which of the two did what the father wanted? The first, they answered. Jesus said to them, I tell you the truth. The tax collectors and the prostitutes are entering the kingdom of God ahead of you. For John came to show you the way of the righteous, and you did not believe him. But the tax collectors and prostitutes did. And even after you saw this, you did not repent and believe him. The moral of the story is actions are stronger than words. I would even go so far as to say words without action are meaningless. It doesn't do much good to go outside these doors, hold our hand high and say we're a Christian, and then not act like it. Not have what's in our hearts and what comes through in our daily actions reflect that, if we're going to be a light. So Jesus, I'll tie this up with our parables, and of course Matthew, Mark, and Luke are full of them. I guess there's anywhere, depending on what you reference and what people want to consider parables, there's anywhere between 30 to 50. Most people say around 40 parables in the Bible. Jesus had a greater knowledge than any of us, didn't he? I mean, this is somebody that knows about the kingdom of heaven, somebody that certainly knew about the earth that he created. He could have easily spoken on a level that was over our heads. But he spoke on our wavelength to make that connection. That's very important. We want to, when we speak to others about God, we want to speak on their wavelength, and that doesn't mean we want to dumb conversation down. We want to speak, as we noted from the start, as Larry noted from the beginning, we want to speak from a point of truth, which means we've got to know the truth. But then beyond rooting your discussion in biblical truth, in fact, we can draw simplistic comparisons, the way that Jesus did, to help people understand the importance of both belief and taking action, and the need to follow up on what you believe with action. Be able to finish off any story with the moral of the story is, and be able to fill in the blank for that person. And sometimes we just need to say that to ourselves. I know I do. We need to say that to ourselves as much as anybody else. Reset, remember what our morals need to be each and every day. And parables are always a good place to turn. So this has certainly not been, I didn't mean for it at least to be a sermon. But we just wanted to turn our minds back to simple truths and simple ways to approach talking about God in everyday life with the people we love, and trying to both strengthen ourselves and grow the church at the same time.